Welcome to the Intentional Leader Podcast presented by Reenergize Professional Coaching. We appreciate you listening in and learning with us. The stories and leadership tips you hear will help you become a great leader. Listen intentionally. Now, to our host, Sean Olson.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to episode 26 of the Intentional Leader Podcast. This is the podcast where you hear the real stories of normal people just like you who have become extraordinary leaders. You'll learn some valuable lessons from their lives, lessons you can apply to become the best leader that you were created to be. When you become an intentional leader, lives are changed. I'm your host, Sean Olson. I'm an executive coach, business owner, author, and speaker. Thank you for joining us today. And for all of you joining us today, our listeners, you've heard us before through all of your favorite platforms, but this is our first ever video podcast also running through on YouTube. So welcome to the video portion of the Intentional Leader Podcast. Our guest today is Lenny Richardson. Lenny is a productivity coach. He has an incredible story today and some incredible leadership lessons for us. Lenny, welcome to the Intentional Leader Podcast.
I appreciate you for having me on, Sean. This is pretty cool to be the first video episode, so I'm excited.
Exactly. I'm glad to have you and have you as the first video one. And this is a stretch for me because I've always said I have a face meant for radio, but now we're going to expand a little bit and bring the video side into it. So, Lenny, you know our show, and you know that we begin every show with the same question of just kind of hearing your professional journey and what you have learned in that journey about leadership. And we'll just have a great conversation because I know your story is a really powerful one. So fill us in on Lenny.
Yeah, so I'll try to not be super long-winded about this. But yeah, kind of go back, start off Penn State as a student. I think initially it was more or less a typical college journey. But eventually one day, I kind of got this letter in the mail, and it said very nicely, "Don't come back. You're not allowed to come back to school and take classes here." So essentially I got kicked out. It wasn't for anything super bad. It wasn't, I've seen kids who get kicked out for things like drugs, academics, things of that nature. It was nothing like that. It was just finances. I owed a few grand for tuition. And the school kind of said, you don't have the full balance paid. Come back when you do. So that was a bit of a struggle at the time because as a student I've never had the most jobs I've had was I was a volleyball coach in high school for like eighth graders, but I never had an actual job. I didn't know anything about budgeting. I knew nothing about finance, knew nothing about even paying my own rent at the time because I had been living on campus with like scholarship money and loan money and my parents paying for it. So to have to leave school so abruptly, I think I got the letter in December of, I forget the year, maybe 2013 or 14, something like that.
Wow.
It was abrupt. So ended up kind of just doing a bunch of different jobs to pay rent. I worked at a gas station, movie theater, Walmart for a brief period of time. I worked as a dishwasher and a busboy at this Irish pub called Kildare's, which no longer exists in Penn State. But for anyone that's listening that may have gone to Penn State over 5 years ago, because I think it got knocked down about 5 years ago, they'd be familiar with it.
Yeah.
But did that, and that's kind of what started it kind of helped me think about leadership. Because when you work so many different jobs, in my personal opinion, you get to see what a good leader is, and you get to see what, sadly, a bad leader is sometimes.
Yeah, absolutely.
I've had some jobs where, you get a supervisor and they're not really, what's a good way to put it? I guess to put it bluntly, they don't care about you as the individual working with them or working for them. But then you get some bosses or some managers or supervisors who are fantastic and they're very accommodating. They are supportive. So that's kind of the first step into it. That's me trying to make a long story short. Hopefully that answers the question.
Yeah. So this, obviously that was a huge shock, right? Like you can't come back to school right now. And then I'm just kind of laughing because you talked about I did this, and this with these jobs, but you were grinding it out, right? So there's a lot of people who would take that shock to their system of being kicked out of school because of finances and, I don't know, play the victim, sit back, complain about it. You picked yourself up and started doing the grind. What was that
Yeah. What was it as far as
in you that made you go that way?
I think I just didn't have a choice because my parents weren't paying for my rent. And I think at the time my rent wasn't even that high. I think it was about $500 a month because I had roommates at the time. But again, I didn't have a job. So I literally just went out and found the first few things I could find. I think the first job that hired me was a gas station called Snappy's.
Okay.
But they were paying $7.50 an hour. And the sad thing about jobs like that I think sometimes people don't consider is if you work one of those low wage jobs, you don't always get full time. Sometimes they give you 20 hours a week, less than that, maybe sometimes more than that. So by the end of the month, you see your paycheck, you're making 750. You worked 20 hours a week. You've made about $500 once taxes takes it
Yeah.
all away. So it's like, oh, I need a second job because this isn't going to work and I need to eat. Um, so yeah, I truly think it was just necessity. I don't think I had much time to think much about it. It was just I need money now to like pay for rent and things like that. Of course, my parents helped me with the down payment to actually start renting, but they weren't helping me actually pay the monthly rent. So that was kind of on me.
Yeah.
So
Yeah. So you got those jobs, started working through. So now pick up like, what's the rest of the story? What brought you to what you're doing today?
yeah, so kind of eventually graduated, kind of started working at the suit store and the suit store, it was a suit store called Brooks Brothers, if anyone's
Mhm.
familiar with
Yep.
that franchise. Worked at Brooks Brothers. Again, didn't pay that much. And at this point, I have to pay for student loans
Yeah.
and you kind of have to pay for rent outside of college because I moved to Northern Virginia, which is a very expensive area,
Absolutely.
which I didn't know about at the time, but it's a very expensive area. Um, from Brooks Brothers, ended up kind of getting my real estate license. So I kind of did real estate on the side. And then while doing real estate, I also got hired at a law firm, which to I can't take any credit for really getting that job at the law firm. The most I did was apply because I needed, of course, more money because Brooks Brothers wasn't paying the bills. But they just liked me, and I had a website at the time from back when I was in college. I had a small business called College Conqueror that I tried to get up and going. It didn't go as well as I'd hoped, but I think they just saw that they liked it, they liked me, and they hired me. So I kind of just did the law firm full time, and
Hmm.
then real estate on the side. One thing led to another. Started my own business called Affinity with a business partner. We did that for a few years. It was going well at first, and then just kind of differences between me and the partner kind of caused it to split up. We split up and then ended the business. Um, and then from doing real estate, I kind of started to do personal branding because I thought personal branding was
Hmm.
effective for real estate agents
Sure.
to kind of market themselves. But I didn't want to just do real estate personal branding. My thing was I wanted to. I don't. My It's kind of my kind of marketing philosophy with this is people like people, and you have to talk about just your philosophies. So my main philosophy, I know this is probably a very long answer to that question,
That's okay.
but my main philosophy was this idea of eudaemonia, which is the good life. People strive for health, wealth, relationships. And this is a concept I kind of stumbled on back when I had first got kicked out of college. And in my opinion, it's a concept that's always kind of pushed me to want to do more things. And it's kind of helped me maintain focus when it comes to my goals and dreams and vision.
Yeah.
Um, so that's kind of the thing I started to talk about more. And ultimately, I kind of figured real estate's good, but the downside about real estate, at least as an agent, is you're kind of stuck in one location doing real estate. And then so I figured, well, let me try to help more people with this idea of eudaemonia. Tried doing that. Tried doing coaching with that. Had a few clients, but the issue with it is that it was too many different concepts. And I think I tried to get people to do all three in too short a period of time.
Yeah.
And then so the thing that everyone kind of needs, at least what I found, to get to eudaemonia is you need time management, you need productivity, you need to know how to manage yourself effectively. And then once you learn how to manage yourself, then you can work on your fitness if that's your priority, or then you can work on your finances if that's your priority, or your relationships if that's your priority. So that was
Okay.
a very long answer, but
No, that's fine. So let's break that down a little bit. So eudaemonia, that's eudaimonia, for those of you that are thinking about eudaemonia,
yes.
means the good life. And you talked about the three elements of that: health, wealth, and relationships, and we'll get to that. But let's focus first on what you said before you get to the health, wealth, and relationship. It's about you and perspective, right? And that self-leadership. So talk about that a little bit, what that means for you and how you've coached other people to that.
Yeah. So for me, I think self leadership to me is kind of just the idea of being disciplined with oneself. I think to be a leader, I'll put it this way. I think to be an effective leader, you kind of have to know where you're going. You have to kind of have a plan. Like I like to study history.
Mm-hmm.
And when I think about history, the best leaders, people like, I know they get a bad rap, but people like Napoleon, people say like Alexander the Great, they're leaders. But the thing that I think makes them such compelling leaders and such influential leaders is that they have a vision, they know where they're going, they can manage themselves, but they can also manage others to help them get whatever it is that they want out of life.
Right.
If you're one of Alexander's followers, maybe what you wanted out of life was just to be known as someone that supported Alexander on his goal. Fair enough. That's your goal. If you work in a business, I've heard this a lot from people my age, people who are millennials.
Yeah.
They'll say they want to work at a job where it's not always about the money. The money, of course, is necessary, but
Right.
it's about feeling like you're making an impact or feeling like you're achieving something or doing some kind of greater good. I think as a leader, you have to kind of figure out what people want, know what you want, and then kind of simultaneously get people to do both. Because I think the reality is that to be a leader, and especially an effective leader, it's not easy, of course, but it's not common. It's very rare, I think, to be a leader. I don't know if I strayed too far from the question. Did I?
No, you're good. I like everything you're sharing there. And this is called the Intentional Leader Podcast. So what you're talking about there is you got to be intentional about it, right?
Absolutely.
It's
Yeah.
not going to happen for you. And I think there are a lot of people that sit back and, you were describing earlier, you've had good bosses, bad bosses. I think we've all been there. And if you're with a bad boss right now, it's very easy to just sit back and say, woe is me, versus I'm either going to keep doing the best that I can here in spite of that boss, or I'm going to find a different place to go and get a good one, right? But everything's intentional with it. And that's where I even like your story, the grind of going after job after job after job, and then the real estate, and then affinity with a friend and developing that. You didn't sit back and say, why isn't everybody helping me, or what's going to happen? You said, I got to go.
Yep. Exactly. Yeah. And that's what, I think it sounds weird, but I think that idea of just doing things and trying to push forward in life, have some at least destination in mind. I think at its core, that's what really makes someone a leader.
Mm-hmm.
Because I truly, this might sound controversial, I don't think most people have that. I think most people, what they kind of do, I think if they were to really try to admit it or sit there and think about it, they allow everything else around them to push them to do something, which is, I'm not saying that's a bad thing. That can be a fantastic thing. But I think most people are probably more followers, and there are a few people that are leaders, and you have to kind of figure out which one would you rather be. Because I think to be a follower is a bit easier, and that's just me being biased. To be a leader is difficult. But there's more responsibility, there's more effort, there's more work, there's more you have to kind of keep in mind when you become a leader. You have to kind of pick and choose,
You do.
It's almost like being a CEO or a boss of a company. There's more risk, but there's more reward if things go well.
Yeah, there is. What I like though about what you were sharing there is, I don't know if you meant to do this now, but I was hearing two different things. Is even if you're a follower at work, if you don't have a leadership position, you still need to lead yourself. You still need to take the reins and control, because no one cares about your career as much as you do. No one cares about your health, wealth, and relationships as much as you do. And so self-leadership exist whether you are an individual contributor or a leader at work or not. You still got to jump on it and be intentional about yourself.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. Yeah, you have to be a leader of yourself. There's a saying. I'm gonna completely mess up the saying.
It's all right.
It's something along the lines of, if you don't give yourself a purpose, or if you don't give yourself a vision, society will give you one instead. So I think you definitely have to be a leader of yourself and give yourself a vision, give yourself a plan, give yourself a destination, um, that you want to go. Otherwise, you'll either not go anywhere at all, which I don't think people would want to do. I think most people want to go at least somewhere
Right.
positive. Or the other outcome is that society, things around you, will give you a destination, and it might not be the best destination for you.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. I think that spans a lot of different realms too, right? You talked about personal brand a little bit.
Mhm.
You have a brand no matter what. The
Yeah.
question is, are you creating what that brand is? Or are you going to let them create it for you? When we work with organizations, the organizational culture, if you don't intentionally create the culture for your company, they're going to create it for you because it's going to exist no matter what. And those things play out. So let's talk about eudaemonia for a minute, the good life and the three key elements. Those three words of health, wealth, and relationships sound self-explanatory, obviously, but it
Yes.
sounds to me like it's not an order, right? You have to take it in the order that's best for you, but just break down those three, just go a little bit deeper on all three of those elements and what that means for the good life.
Yeah. So when it comes to eudaimonia, first of all, it's kind of this old Greek philosophical concept. I believe people claim Socrates came up with it, but Socrates never really wrote things down. He kind of just dictated to his students. And I think Aristotle sort of coined the term for Socrates, and he began to write it down. But basically, it's just a framework of how people, at least how Socrates believed people should live their lives to have the best quality life possible. So, health, you need to be in good shape. But I think if you hear health, it's not just looking good, because I think people will assume health is like aesthetics, and that's not really it. It's mental health, and it's also just being in decent shape, good enough shape. You want to be functional. You don't want to be someone who maybe struggles to walk, or someone who's just really sickly. If you can help it,
Right.
obviously genetics things play a role in that. But if you can help it, you don't want to be in that position. Wealth, you don't need to be rich, but you do want to be living. You want to live below your means. You want to be financially secure. You don't want to be in a position where you have to do things that you might not want to do just because you have to. Kind of like me back in the past with the jobs that I didn't particularly like, just because you need to pay the bills. And I think part of that too is financial education. You have to know a little bit about finances to make sure you're
Mhm.
not in a bad position. And then relationships is, it's the romantic part of it too, which I think when people hear relationships, that's what they default to. Kind of a relationship between, a partner or something like
Mhm.
that. But it's also your social relationships.
Yeah.
Do you have a good circle of people that uplift you, that are positive, that are interested in the things you're interested in? Do they support you? Things of that nature. And then once you combine those three things, as far as Socrates, I guess, was concerned, the combination of those three things is what will give someone a higher quality life, the good life, so to speak.
Yeah. I like that. Plays out well. So, as a productivity coach, give us a glimpse at what you're doing with your clients. Like, are your clients people that are feeling like they're at the bottom and they need to be picked up? Are they clients who are doing really well, but they want to do excellent? Just talk about who are your clients and how are you coaching them? What's that look like?
Yeah, so it's a bit of a mix. I haven't had anyone yet that feels like they're at the bottom.
Mhm.
Usually it's kind of young professionals or people who are kind of just getting into the professional world, and they feel scattered. Like, I'll give you one example. I had someone who was he's starting a real estate development company, and he also wanted to get in shape, and he just felt like his daily structure wasn't there. Like, he was already doing things, but he kind of wanted to tighten it up and just make sure that he was getting in enough time to go to the gym, enough time to work on his business, enough time to meet different, in his case, real estate agents, because he thought real estate agents would help him sell some of these, I don't want to say units because they weren't units, but like buildings that he was
Right.
to develop. Um, so it kind of depends. I haven't had anyone that's really low, but it's usually people who just feel that they don't have a lot of structure in their lives and they want to kind of create more structure. Um, Most of them, it's more structure towards the financial side,
Hmm.
and I think that's completely fine. I've actually had no one yet that's been super interested in the social aspect, which I find interesting now that I'm talking about it. But it's usually young professionals that kind of just want to get more done every single day, but they feel like they're procrastinating or they feel like they're not focusing enough. So
So are you finding common themes that's holding them back?
yeah, so the number one thing that I always see is procrastination. People just procrastinate, and I totally get that. That's a normal thing. Um, but I find that a lot of times they come in and they want to do A, B, and C, but they're just not doing A, B, and C. And so usually what I tell them, the very first thing I do, we kind of sit there and figure out what are your long-term goals. But the first practical thing I make them do is get a planner and really try to get into the habit of planning things out the night before.
Hmm.
And that's just my personal suggestion.
Sure.
The main reason is I think if you plan things out, and I like to say by the hour, plan things out by the hour from the moment you want to wake up, from the moment you want to go to bed. And if you do that, and you do that the night before, you wake up knowing exactly what you want to do that day. And I found, and this is kind of what they've also claimed when they try to do this, you feel guilty if you don't actually get those things done. And usually, what I tell people, if you're brand new to this, don't try to put like 1,000 things in your planner. I don't think that's the best way to go about it if you're brand new to trying to structure your day. What I tell people is figure out what the top 1 to 3 things are that you believe or that you know will help you get to whatever goal you have. Plan your day out so that way at least that top one thing is on the planner, like very first thing, or as early as you can get it in on your schedule. And then if nothing else, make sure that one thing is done. That's it. Because my thing is, I think when it comes to, I'll say this, because a lot of people, they struggle with procrastination, they struggle with organization.
Right.
I think when it comes to the whole procrastination, I usually find that the top 2 things, the top 2 reasons people procrastinate is because they either don't know how to do something or they're afraid of the outcome. And so that fear of the outcome just kind of keeps them from starting or really getting things
Yeah.
going.
Yeah.
So I think the planner kind of solves that. If you don't know how to do something, well, that's easy. You can just go look it up or you can talk to someone who has done something. If you're afraid of the outcome or if you're afraid to start because you don't know how things are going to go, putting it on the planner kind of just forces you, okay, I need to get it done because if I don't get it done, it'll feel worse to reflect on it and realize that I'm not making progress because objectively the planner will show you
Yeah.
you've made no progress. You put one thing on your planner and you didn't even do it. So now you have to do it tomorrow or you got your
Exactly.
this really terrible guilty feeling and it'll be in your face. You can't ignore it because you've written it out. So
Yeah, I like both sides of that feeling though, because I like the fact you're saying doing daily, right? So at nighttime, write it out for the next day. You're not saying write out the next 2 weeks. It's just write out
yes,
the next day. What
just
I
the next
really
day.
like about that is, yes, if I don't accomplish it at the end of the night, I might feel guilty, unfulfilled, whatever word you might want to use. But I'm also then sitting down to write out the next day and I can put it back on there. And it's kind of like, okay, maybe today was not a failure. I just didn't get it done and I feel bad about it. But tomorrow's a new day. It's a fresh
Exactly.
day and I can go after it. So that feeling doesn't have to linger with me. It's not going to pull me down. I'm like, I just got to go after it and get it done.
Yes. Yep.
Yeah, I
Yeah,
like that.
exactly.
So you said a lot of it's around the financial piece. So they're obviously struggling to get a hold of their finances in whatever realm. What are you finding are some of the common tips you're giving these people to get a grip on their finances?
Yeah. So usually when it comes to the finance thing, it's not so much that they're trying to, it's more so they're maybe someone trying to start a business
Hmm.
and they're trying to go from here to here, which I'll give you an example. I had someone recently. He's a copywriter, and he's been trying to just get different agencies to hire him as a copywriter. And so we kind of went through a schedule. And I remember for months, I told him, based on what he's discussed with me on how he's acquired recent um, agencies to work with, the thing he needs to do the most is really just reach out to more people. It's just a pure volume
Yeah.
thing, which sounds simple to a lot of people. And it is kind of simple. And yet most people, when told, if you need more leads, probably just reach out to more people. They don't do it because they may be afraid of something. It depends on the individual. So in his situation, it wasn't that he didn't have any money. It's just that he wanted to kind of get more agencies, but he's also kind of comfortable. And I remember once we kind of sat there and I said to him, what you need to do is just do nothing else for the next week besides outreach. And don't do it all day. Just take like 2 hours and just only do outreach. No YouTube, no music with lyrics, just outreach. And he did it. And I think like the first week he tried it, he got like 2 or 3 new agencies he worked with. And this is after about 8 months of him not making any progress. So I don't know. I think for a lot of people, it's really just simplifying what they're doing, probably finding the few things that are just actually going to get them progress, and then just doing it. And it sounds so simple, and it kind of is simple, but I don't know. It's one of those things where it's like a lot of things in life to me are very simple, but
yeah, it is.
People just don't do it.
Yeah, it's procrastination. There's a lot of reasons behind it. It's interesting. It made me think of a conversation I had recently with a person, and they were basically looking back at their past year, and they didn't accomplish everything they wanted to accomplish. And I just simply said, why? And they're like, I sat down and I was thinking about it, and they're like, I just waste a lot of time.
Yeah.
I'll jump on social for a while, and then I'll go do this for a while, and my neighbor's outside, so I'll go talk to my neighbor for a while. And it's a work from home situation, right? So there's, in some senses, more distractions that are present there. And I said, so what are you going to do different? And he goes, I just got to buckle down. He's like, I got to buckle down and just realize that I'm wasting time on those things and I can be more productive. And he's in a commission world too, right? So it's like, if you're not doing it, you're not going to get paid for it.
Yeah.
But it comes back to that idea. And you said this word at the very beginning of our show about discipline. And so the Intentional Leader podcast, I call it intentionality too, right? You have to be intentional about all that you're doing to be disciplined in it. And when we have discipline and when we're intentional, that's when we get the fruits of our labor. It's not just going to happen for us.
Right.
Yeah. So you're doing a lot of different things. So how does Lenny keep himself disciplined to be doing the things he should be doing?
Yeah, that is a good question. So I do the exact same thing I share with clients. Every night I sit there and I plan my day. I try, and this might be a little bit different than what I would share with a client. I try to pack in as much as I can because I like to just kind of work as much as I can throughout the day. And once I start to feel tired, that's when I stop. But I think over years for me, I don't feel guilty about not getting certain things done. As long as I get the main things done, I'm happy.
Yep.
I think over time, over the years, it kind of just, I think I've just built up a habit of being relatively disciplined. Obviously, there's some days where I fall off and I intend to do A, B, and C, and I get nothing done. Then you have to kind of reset there, and I feel the guilt too. The next day, you kind of just get back on the wagon and try again. But yeah, as far as discipline, I think now it's kind of just a habit. I try my best to kind of just do things, not make excuses for myself. Stick to the planner and try not to overwhelm myself, because I think that's also, I think for me personally, and I think other people probably have felt this, if you overwhelm yourself too much, or if you kind of get to that burnout state, I think you create sort of like this negative association with things like work or things like trying to accomplish a goal. And that'll also prevent you from doing it or trying to do it.
Right.
Like you're sitting there and you might want to, I'll give an example actually. Me and some friends were talking about this recently. A friend of mine, so I like to work out as well. And a friend of mine, he wanted to get in the gym. He was asking me about a workout routine and how I could help him. And I said to him, I'm not a trainer, but I'll give you what I think could help. And so I gave him a routine and I worked out with him just to show him the workout to make sure he's doing it correctly. And he wanted to work out for about 2 hours. And this is someone who does not work out at all.
That's a long time.
Yeah, it's a very long time. And he was excited. He's going through, he's like, let's do cardio now. Let's lift this. And I said to him, you don't want to do too much too quickly because you feel enthusiastic right now because it's brand new. Maybe you see a vision of yourself where you're in super good shape, and that's fine. That's fantastic. But the issue is that, and this applies to productivity and discipline as well, if you do too much too soon, you'll burn out.
Mm-hmm.
Physically, you'll burn out when it comes to weightlifting. And in about 2 or 3 days, if you keep the same pace, you're going to feel too fatigued and too exhausted. And then your brain's going to associate this negative feeling with you working out. So next time you go to work out, you're going to think to yourself, last time I worked out, it kind of sucked. I was really sore, couldn't really walk well. I felt super sick. Like I've seen some trainers who work their trainers or they work their clients too much to the point where they throw up.
Yeah.
I don't really know why people do that because now in that person's mind, they're thinking, last time I worked out, I threw up. And I don't think anyone likes throwing up.
Right.
So they're not going to work out anymore because now they're going to associate exercising, which can be good for you, with throwing up, which is usually not a good sign.
Mm-hmm.
So the same applies to trying to be more disciplined or getting more done. You don't want to do too much too soon. You want to kind of take things easy enough, which is, I think, so over the years, to shorten this up, that's kind of what I learned to do for myself. I kind of created a habit because I don't push myself to do too much. I do enough or what's moving me in the direction that I think is a good direction, and then I stop and I allow myself to feel good about what I have done.
Yep, I like that. You've used the word habit a number of times there, and I think that's one of the keys to it, right? So even with like the nightly planner, I don't remember the exact thing. I think they say if you do something 28 days in a row, it begins to become a habit, right? So it's like if I do a month of that, it develops that habit. And if it's putting out what's a modest goal for the day, what are the things I want to accomplish, then I start developing that rhythm of feeling good about it. It's like, hey, I can do this. This is going to work out well for me. I love those things. So, well, Lenny, it's been good to have you today. We finish every episode of the Intentional Leader podcast with the same question. Mm-hmm. That question is, what is something our listeners can do intentionally today to lead more effectively?
Yes. Okay. So my answer to this, I don't know if it's going to be well received or not, but I think the thing most people can do to become a more intentional leader, and I think a lot of people don't do this, and I'm guilty of this myself, is listen more. And I know that might sound strange, but when I think of the word listening, I think there's a difference between hearing, which I think a lot of people do, and listening, which I think is there's more aspects of listening. So for example, to me, listening, and you can take this if you're, if you have a girlfriend or boyfriend, whatever, or if you're in a leadership position of any kind, to me, listening is you hear what the person's saying, you tailor what they're saying based on who the person is, and you're also watching out for the way they say something. And so an example I kind of like to think about when I think about listening is, I actually use my own girlfriend as an example. Sometimes my girlfriend's talkative. She likes to talk a lot, which is a good thing. It's a good thing. I don't mean that if she sees this, I'm not saying that in a bad way. But I can tell when something's wrong with her if I hang out with her for a day and she has said nothing or very little. And then I say to her, babe, what's wrong? And she says, nothing's wrong. Meanwhile, she doesn't really want to look at me. Her arms are kind of crossed. She hasn't been talking the entire day. To me, that's listening because she verbally said nothing's wrong. If you were to only hear what she said, you're going to miss the nuance of everything where she hasn't been speaking all day. So clearly something must be wrong because that's not normal for her. She said, I'm fine or nothing's wrong. And yet she barely wants to kind of look at me. She's kind of turning to the side. She's kind of mumbling the way she says it. So when I say listen, I think that's, to me, what listening means. And I feel like I've worked with people or I've had managers where an employee might say, you know, I don't like how this is working out. And that's a more blunt thing to say, but the manager or supervisor or whoever might hear it and say, okay, we'll work on that. And then nothing gets done. It's like, well, you weren't really
Right.
listening, because now they're vocalizing that they're upset and they want you to do something. And maybe they're more upset than they're letting on, but you're not really listening. You're just hearing them. And maybe you do something small to make them, to maybe you think that makes them happy in the short run, but you haven't really solved the problem and you haven't really investigated it to figure out what the problem even is, because you're not listening. So hopefully
Yep.
that wasn't really confusing for me to put
I
that.
love it. Great tip. Listen first and listen to understand. Awesome. Well, Lenny, it's been great to have you on the Intentional Leader podcast. For listeners, there'll be in our show notes some links if you want to go to Lenny's website and follow up with him on some of his social. Lenny, it's been great to have you, and pray you have a blessed, good life.
You as well. I appreciate you having me on. It was a good time.
Thank you.
Thank you for tuning in to this episode of the Intentional Leader Podcast presented by Reenergize Professional Coaching. Be sure to see the show notes for links to Reenergize Professional Coaching and links to contact our guests. Now, hit that subscribe button so that you are alerted with every new episode of the Intentional Leader Podcast.